Alright, so what's going on, guys? After another break, our favorite pain train is back. I assume there will be another break as Ishikawa seems to be glued to that PS5. So I decided I'd do a chapter analysis of the most recent chapter, number 99. Also, I shouldn't have to say this, but massive spoilers ahead for anyone who has not yet read Houseki no Kuni. In fact, what are you even doing here? Close this video and go read. But also come back because I appreciate the views. So after thinking about this chapter, I've come to realize that I like some aspects a lot and I don't like some of the aspects as much. However, it's much more positive than negative. To be honest, at this point it all depends on how you like the execution and the presentation of Phos, as I like the direction that Ishikawa is taking the series. However, I still have a problem with it. I wish it was a bit more fleshed out before Phos came to these decisions. Although there is a good reason for it, I prefer Ishikawa's writing before the break. But maybe that is the goal of these new chapters. So let's discuss this chapter and some of the points I found interesting and enjoyed. After going back and rereading the previous few chapters to get a better insight into the flow of what Ishikawa may have been hinting at, there's a few things I want to discuss. Houseki has been about a lot of things, primarily one of which has been change, whether that refers to Phos, to the Lunarians, to the Earth, to nature, to practically anything mentioned within this manga. The essence of life and time itself is through the change which takes place within it. After all, it's humanity and life who gives value and meaning to concepts such as this. For everything else, time simply marches forward, ever foreboding and forcing these shifts with it. My previous point is explained and told by the doctor here. However, not only that, but this core theme has been brought up multiple times throughout the series itself in varying degrees and easily tracked and expressed through the physical changes of Phos. The idea of change is explored here primarily through Phos, yet also as an external reference through nature itself, which is also indicative of how quickly change occurs and how unprepared one can be towards it. During the 10,000 years that Phos has survived, there are two important aspects that I want to talk about. Phos does not get this much time to simply reflect upon themselves and their decisions, but relives Adamant's memories over and over again. Being stuck in that loop, Phos's sense of self becomes diluted and mixed up with his, indicative by the panel in which Phos closes their eyes as Adamant and wakes up as themselves, only to still see the doctor in front of them. The blacked out pages, I do have to mention, are in fact a callback to chapter 1, where Phos seemingly wakes up from a deep void-like slumber to the taunts of their fellow gems asking that they go to the gems' aid. But since everyone else is gone and Phos has lost all their memories, it's all black now. And Phos, being who is so clearly depicted through their physical body and their jarring facial expressions, is now in a form which shows practically nothing. There are no eyes shown, simply a carving in the shape of a leaf, or maybe a single water drop. So what has become of this version of Phos? This version which has gone through 10,000 years of isolation and repeated the memories of Adamant until they have become broken. The assimilation of a being who was created with a singular reason to pray, and the deterioration of a being who was simply lost. So Phos struggles with Adamant's memories on repeat, and before being given barely any time to think, the Lunarians show up. For them, their being has been resurrected. They want to die and achieve peace, and the person to deliver it stands in front of them. Yet Phos stares upon the bodies of those they call their friends, the master which they loved. Phos claims that they want happiness, but what exactly does that mean? Ever since the start, Phos has been selflessly throwing their life away over and over again. It's their constant delusion that they believe they're doing it for them. So what do? They let go. The suffering, the pain, the abandonment, in all of it, there's only been one constant factor. They've been ever so alone. Yet, despite all that, Phos wants their love. They want the Lunarians to adore them. So they claim mixing Adamant's ideals with them, that to become nothingness is their wish. In spite of that, however, they still hesitate, as shown in that second panel, for this enlightened being is nothing of a sort. He's simply becoming a means for the end for the Lunarians. And so, Phos does their job, which they've craved for so long, and it leaves them empty. The purpose that Phos sought was finally given to them. So why wouldn't they pray? Aren't they doing it for everyone else? For isn't that what will make everyone else happy? And if it makes them happy, then Phos should be happy as well. So pray, Phos, for it's the right thing to do, for you want nothingness just as much as they do. With these radical shifts in their physical form, there has always been a shift in the mindset of Phos. However, this form, which was supposed to be an enlightened version of Phos, is fundamentally flawed in its ideology. That Phos themselves were never enlightened. Phos never knew what they wanted for themselves. They were constantly searching the entire manga for a place where they belonged and a place where they could call home. And so here you lie again, all alone. Ever since the first chapter, you, who was found in the dirt, indistinguishable from the blades of grass, the burden of every other gem in existence, has led them to their salvation. You have become their history. You're free now, Phos. So why do you fall in those blades of grass? What is it you seek? Do you seek to find your home again? Isn't that what you wanted? Aren't you home at last? So what is happiness for Phos at this particular point? They've become everything and transcended, helped everyone, and finally found a purpose. And yet they're still left alone. So they fall into the grass, trying to waste away into eternity, but try as they might, they can't forget. They're unable to forget. As time ticks forward, Phos imminently keeps looking backward, which is what those black panels were referenced to. Phos's closed eyes yearning and remembering his past, misguided, broken, put back together. Looking back at it, has Phos ever done something entirely for themselves? Now, this part was a bit more on the nose and I wish it was done a little bit more subtle, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I still adore it. The rock, which is very clearly a foil to Phos, while Phos plays the role that Adamant would have, through their self-love, finally makes Phos understand the key element that they've been missing entirely. That despite sacrificing themselves for the rest of the world, Phos has never once actualized what they want. The happiness they strive for during the invasion, they still want that. But how does it come into reality? What defines that happiness? To know so fleetingly of the simple fact that you want to be happy, yet to be denied any form in which to truly explore it. In my opinion, that is what's so tragic about Phos. From that moment on, they've been again put into this role, forced into this responsibility as Adamant's memories run rampant in their mind. Only now, when they've been given a few moments to think, do they begin to realize what happened. The weight of their actions, which might have been the right thing at the time, fall upon their shoulders as they simply talk to this inorganic rock. Not once was Phos ever allowed to choose themselves. I see a lot of people being confused, by the way, with the stories basically definitively stating that Phos was unloved, which I find interesting. Maybe it's because the first image that comes to a lot of our minds when Phos says no one loved them is that of bullying or complete isolation. Which, to be fair, the gems did to some extent belittle and isolate both Phos and Cinnabar, but the reality is that this isn't really right. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference, and that's exactly what the gems were. Indifferent. They really couldn't care less if Phos lived, died, or spent 200 years or 10,000 years in a coma. Yes, they'd care for Phos to the extent that it was convenient for them, but not really past that. Yes, they'd be friendly, at least before Phos destroyed the status quo, but they didn't really connect with Phos in any meaningful way. Even after Phos was clearly struggling, even as they begged for help, the gems simply did not care. And the greatest tragedy, as highlighted in this chapter, is that Phos did have chances to actually connect with some of the gems. For example, Cinnabar, Diamond, Antarc, Ghost Quartz. Jury is still out for Carangorum though, but these gems either died or were given away because Phos wanted so badly to change, because they wanted to please others, because they wanted to be loved by everyone. What's even more sad is that those exact people told them that they had to change. Antarc said they were weak, Diamond told them that maybe change a lot, and Acmea just filled Phos's head from the beginning that they needed to change. The war he created made them useless by being brittle. He took Phos's legs, then head, forcing them to change, then he took Antarc and Carangorum away, and even Cinnabar connected with Phos only because Phos did a promise to find them a job. And still, they said they were a pain, unable to see themselves in the struggle Phos had. They indeed chose to change, but to a certain extent, they did not choose either. They were forced to. It's so sad because Phos couldn't even grasp the concept of being loved, since so many of them told them to change, except for Congo. But can you be able to love yourself when everyone and everything told you you're not good enough? Phos, while attempting to cry, is unable to even produce any form of tears. They hold their face in this godlike form and are yet unable to do anything. In this case, I believe that the white dwarf could be representing the current sun, which indicates a massive amount of time has passed since the prayer and the current Phos which is being portrayed. As time ticks forward, change naturally happens to the world, to life on it, and most importantly, to you. And to Phos, perhaps your greatest sin was never once listening to yourself. Perhaps your greatest sin was trying to find love through others, through methods you thought were right. Perhaps your greatest sin is that your desires, which made you so innately human, were what drove others to use you. Perhaps your greatest sin was just trying to find somewhere you belong. Perhaps your greatest sin was simply wanting happiness. Our lost little gem found solace from an insignificant pebble that cannot see, walk, nor feel. And yet, in spite of its uselessness, the pebble is content with what it is. For the pebble is having its very first conversation with someone it can share existence with. Harboring no demands for any of Phos's magnificent feats, the pebble stays just the way it is, happy with a friend. Their words are just enough to decompartmentalize centuries upon centuries of aimless, hateful suffering and regret that Phos has gone through. All of it collapses onto itself in a view of the night that fills Phos's lonely world with just the tiniest bit of wonder. Even a pebble cast in the middle of a lake creates ripples that eventually reach the stone. And in an empty world filled with silence, there's always enough room to be heard. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Phos's finally found their own happiness. Man, honestly, Houseki no Kuni is just wonderful, man. But yeah, with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about this chapter in the comments down below. Be sure to leave a like rating if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're not already, follow me on Twitter, link is down below. Other than that, hope you guys are doing good, and peace.